The first couple days were really a blur. You're in the hospital, you're drugged up. They do surgery to stabilize the spine. I remember a nurse, coming in, and she was being, very helpful and everything. Oh, you'll get out of here, and you have a, wheelchair, and your friends will call you, give you a nickname like Wheels or something like that. She was trying to be nice, but I didn't take that the greatest way because I didn't want to be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. I wanted to walk. Well, I'm David from Winter Garden, Florida, and I grew up in Michigan, a little town called Ludington, Michigan, right on the beach. So it was a fun place to grow up. My parents have a Christmas tree farm, so we grew up with a farm life, and that involved a lot of early mornings. So I think I learned a lot of sort of early discipline from that. And in high school, I was kind of the played sports, did well in class and that sort of thing. But I was definitely a math and science person. So when I went to school at the University of Michigan, I went into engineering, and chemical engineering to be specific. As I got towards graduation, I kind of figured I would go into oil field services. I was going to work for one of the oil field companies out in the fields, out on the rigs, out in the Gulf, up north, wherever it would have been, because I liked working outdoors. I was out celebrating the end of school, and I had a little bit too much to drink, and it led to some poor decisions where I actually fell off of a second-story porch, and that was about a 10 to 12 foot fall, and I landed on my back and crushed my spinal cord. And because of that, I haven't been able to move my legs or walk independently for 14 years now. It was a huge change for a guy, who was just about ready to go out and be on his own, to suddenly be completely dependent upon friends and family again. Probably getting out of the hospital in those 6 to 9 months after I was out was probably the most difficult time, because you're not getting out as much as you used to, and just getting out amongst people and friends, is a big part of staying positive and sort of keeping your spirits up. So there was a lot of tough stuff in there, but I knew, I kind of saw, maybe not lights at the end of the tunnel, but I had goals that I still, could reach. And I knew that I wasn't going to just be able to, hop out of the chair and go run or walk. That obviously was not in the cards. And so I remember being at my parents' house, maybe 6 months after the injury, and my dad would say, well, you want to go out and try and do some of this? So we went out into the driveway, and my parents' driveway has a little hill to it. And so we parked the wheelchair at the bottom, and I got up on the walker. Fortunately, my dad was walking the wheelchair right behind me in case I got tired. I probably went 10 steps and then just fell back into the wheelchair. But we went out and we did it the next day, and it was a few more steps. And day after that, it was a few more steps. And it's a long process, but it was worth it. And then after that, it was obviously, well, what am I going to do after this? So I had crushed my back, and I was, working on getting more independent. And obviously, at this point, I'm just on Social Security disability, which is, you're basically living at the poverty level. It's going to be a very difficult life if I was going to do that for the rest of my life. So, I knew that my mind was fine. I could still process, things that way. So I started looking at ways where I could continue to use my engineering degree. And one of the ways that I came up with was patent law, which is a field of law where you're helping people to get patents on their new inventions, or you're researching their new inventions, that sort of thing. And so I applied to a few different law schools, and I got accepted to the University of Miami. And so I graduated with about $75,000 in student loans, and I start paying back just the minimum payments, month by month, and you're going to be paying on those for 20 years or whatever it is. Getting out of debt, has a lot of parallels with, me coming from my injury to the point where I could walk again, because, at the very beginning, both of those goals were so far away. If I had sat in the chair the whole time, I was never going to be able to build it up to the point where I could walk, 100 feet or 500 feet or 1,000 feet. And it's the exact same thing with your debt. If you look at that number and get frustrated from the beginning, you're never going to start. So 4 years out of law school, I've been paying the minimum payments on these student loans, and it had slowly whittled its way down to about $70,000. And I had also been saving up for and bought a brand new truck during this time. So I bought the truck, but of course I had the student loan debt. And right around this time, I had also purchased a house. I was driving in the truck one day, and I had heard Dave Ramsey before on the radio. he must have taken a call or been talking to somebody that day, and he was talking about the risk that your debt carries. And I hadn't really thought of it that way before, because I figured, well, I've got a job, I can make the payment on my student loans, I can pay my mortgage, but he mentioned, something could happen, you could get hurt. If there ever was, that was the turning point in my debt-free journey, where I finally began to hear what Dave was saying and to hear, what type of risk debt posed in my life. And so I got home that night and I wrote out my budget and started doing it exactly the way that he teaches, where you're not looking backwards at your money, you're looking forward. And by this time, of course, I'm listening to Dave pretty regularly on his podcasts, and it really fires you up. I can make extra money if I work extra. So I took extra work. I'd work in the evenings rather than watching some television, or I'd work a little bit on the weekend instead of sleeping in late. And so this money just starts hammering at the student loan, and less than 2 years later it was gone. Once I did that, I took a look over at my mortgage.
So what kind of debt is the $252?
Well, there was a student loan from law school in there and my mortgage.
You paid off your house and your law school debt.
Exactly.
Just like that.
I guess one of the ways that I look at it is that I don't have it that bad. There's always somebody else out there that's been through something even worse. I think the reason that I decided to get out of debt was, you hear the relief in people's voices when they're calling into Dave's show and they're debt-free. Just being able to take that sort of stress out of your life, allows you to sleep so much better. You can focus on other things in your life, your friends, your family, your relationships, your health. There's no reason for me to sit at home and feel sorry for myself and say, well, I can't accomplish this. Yeah, of course you can accomplish it, but it's going to be hard work, and you need to be willing to put that work in to do it. The grand total of debt that I paid off was $252,000, and it happens faster than you think it's going to happen. Start today, start tomorrow, but get started, because a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you'll thank yourself for doing that.
I'm debt free!